Hello and welcome to This Is Austin. Let me paint you a picture.
Please.
The year is 2026, 5 years into our future.
Yes.
Elon Musk has just been elected the Emperor of Mars. Dogecoin is the only universal currency.
Checks out. Go ahead.
And AMD and Intel are on a banana peel.
That's not where I thought you were going with that. So if you look at the trends over the last few years, there's a lot changing in not only the PC space, but in the mobile space, right? For a very long time, specifically on the PC side of things, there were two chip companies who made all of the CPUs, AMD and Intel. Right. You're probably familiar. However, now as we sit here in 2021, there are tides a changing, winds a drifting, metaphors are falling apart. And the thing that I think we really need to keep in mind here is that I think the next 5 years are gonna be really exciting, but I also think that there's gonna be a lot of fragmentation because the duopoly that has existed for 15 plus years is, I don't want to say crumbling, but there are some things that are gonna shake things up a lot. I said the word things a lot, by the way, you're welcome.
And we already have that starting now. So like you say, a few years ago, the only chips you could buy was AMD, Intel. I mean, obviously there's some smaller ones. You have so many new companies who are making their own chips now.
Yes.
So Apple makes the M1 chip, which is obviously the biggest one, which is...
We're specifically talking about computers, by the way, for right now. Obviously, mobile's a whole other thing.
Yeah. Microsoft has announced that they will be making their own chips for servers and Surfaces.
Yep.
However, just a little asterisk on that. That's all going to be business side things. I don't know if you're
probably.
You're probably not going to see those in a consumer laptop anytime soon.
Maybe. We'll see.
Yeah. Then you have little outliers.
Okay.
So obviously Samsung makes their own mobile chips, and they do make some for Chromebooks.
Yes. You can buy a Chromebook with a Samsung processor in it, so that's 3.
Yeah. Amazon makes their own AWS chips, the Graviton ARM chips,
which are server chips.
Yes, they are server chips. But as we were talking in our pre-brief, I mean, I don't see why they would do it, but they could theoretically put those in a laptop if they wanted to. And then you have weird outliers of Raspberry Pi Foundation just made their own silicon.
Well, that was a little different, but sure.
But like again, it's you have.
There's a.
When are we gonna see a Raspberry Pi full laptop?
I mean, you could just make one of those. So the thing is, all of these have a single thread. ARM. Now, if you're not familiar with ARM, ARM is the company and the...
This is where I was
gonna say structure, the instruction set. The instruction set.
This is where I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay, here's the thing, right? x86 and x64 has been around for a very long time, right? Intel and AMD have very much cornered that market. That's a traditional PC. However, ARM processors are based on a different instruction set, which is much more mobile focused, but in a lot of ways is a lot more modern, right? It's taken years to sort of catch up, but at this point, you have a lot of that sort of legacy stuff that Intel and AMD are dragging along. Their ARM is kind of jettisoned. Case in point, how Apple with the M1 chip have created essentially the fastest individual cores on any device, period. Your overclocked Ryzen, your i9 at 5.2 gigahertz, it still can hardly hold a candle to a 15 watt laptop chip that goes inside your MacBook Air, for example, right? So that's kind of like the baseline for what ARM makes possible. And the thing is, ARM is not necessarily a company who makes chips. They design like the sort of the structure, and then other companies such as Apple, such as Samsung, such as NVIDIA, who are purchasing ARM right now, can all license that and make their own version. Right? But ARM, it does seem like we're looking at a case right now where ARM is more powerful, or has the potential to make more powerful chips and much more power efficient chips, which is essentially all that matters if you have more performance and less power. Congratulations, you have won the silicon lottery.
ARM doesn't matter as much for desktop because you don't need the battery efficiency.
Yes.
Like obviously you want lower power consumption, and I mean,
course,
just from the practical standpoint, it just means literally a lower electrical bill.
Well, but it also enables new form factors. You may not need as much cooling. It's always a good thing.
Yeah, like it's good things, but it doesn't like matter as much as compared to like the MacBook, which is less than an inch thick. Like obviously it has better applications for the laptop side.
Yeah.
And so if we were to see this massive change in the industry, the way I would see it rippling out would be, all right, we're already starting to see it with phones. companies making their own chips and stuff like that, better chips.
So here's where we are right now in 2021, right? Desktops, obviously, overwhelmingly Intel at the moment, but AMD are taking major inroads, right? AMD are doing very well. Yeah, but
AMD is really like
there are years and years of Intel devices.
AMD has
there.
done nothing for decades before.
I mean,
that's unfair to AMD. That's unfair to AMD.
It's been only a couple years since AMD's on the come up. And keep in mind with all of this stuff, there are these huge sort of tides, right? None of this changes on a dime. It is a sort of gradual change where kind of like the tide shifts this way and that way, right? But right now, Intel still has a pretty dominating lead, but AMD are certainly catching up. And if you look at like the individual like month-to-month sales, AMD are probably doing just as good on the desktop side, right? But then you look on the laptop side, where Intel and AMD have come sort of blow for blow, largely because Intel had some major manufacturing issues, which held them back by many years and allowed AMD to catch up. And inevitably, TSMC is going to make every single chip in the entire universe, so it doesn't matter. But if you look outside of the sort of x86 ARM sort of divide, what you look at here is a future in which it seems like for some use cases, Intel and AMD are not going to be as prevalent as they are today, right? Servers would be a big one, right? For a very long time, Intel dominated the server market. They were really the standard. And just like in the desktop and the laptop space, AMD have caught up in a big way and deliver, generally speaking, better performance at cheaper prices. However, when it comes to a server, the price of the chip, so a lot of times if you've ever watched a Linus Tech Tips video, and if you're watching this channel and you haven't, I'm surprised had you make it here, but thanks for joining and make sure to subscribe to the channel because we make better videos than Linus. I can't even say it.
No, we don't.
But when it comes to the server, right, you might look at like some $10,000 chip and go, oh my God, that's insane. But when you look at a chip that's sitting inside a server rack in a Google data farm that runs at 100% 24/7 for 5 years at a time, the cost of the electricity to run that chip is far more expensive than the actual chip itself in many, many cases, right? So in a server sort of context, ARM is perfect. And that is a big reason why you look at AWS being largely powered by these Graviton chips that AWS or Amazon or whatever subsidiary has designed, because they are more power efficient and generally speaking deliver good enough performance that if it costs half as much to run and it delivers 80% the performance, you just saved $40 million on your electricity bill as AWS, right? I mean, there are very clear incentives for this to happen. The laptop side, I think, as you were talking about earlier, that's where it gets a little bit more interesting, because that's sort of a blend of the power efficiency is incredibly important, right? The performance is very important, but it's not the be all and end all. But it does go a long way toward making ARM a more viable future.
It's hard. It's hard to look at like the M1 chip and what it's given on the MacBook and say that laptops should have anything other than ARM. Like, except for the very specific use cases of like the jerk off like desktop grade laptops that are these massive bricks. Like, it's very hard to say like, all right, I want my 14 hours of battery life. It's a laptop. I want it to be portable and everything like that. It's having an x86 chip just makes it such a hard sell.
Intel AMD. So for context, where the laptop space is right now, if you look on the Apple side, they obviously control the entire stack. They make the software, the hardware, they make the chips, right? Which is why they're able to bring their very powerful, honestly, mobile-based stuff, right? The M1 chip inside a MacBook is not wildly different than the A14 chip that you have in like an iPhone or something, right? They've just essentially scaled it up, beefed it up, but it's still at its core pretty similar. But the difference is Apple, as the creator of everything, including the software, rewrote all of macOS to work natively, and then said, hey, by the way, we're not making any more Intel Macs. So guess what? If you want to make a Mac app ever in the future and you want it to, work on people's systems, make sure that you actually make it with ARM compatibility or Apple Silicon compatibility in mind, right? Apple has the sort of strength to just say, hey, Chrome, you want to work on a Mac? Get on board, because the train's leaving the station and ain't got no brakes. I think that's a direct quote from Tim Cook. I think he said that. However, on the Windows side, it is actually very different, because Windows on ARM has been around for years, right? We talked about Windows RT with the original Surface.
And every time we talk about it, it's talking about how poor ARM on Windows really is.
Well, okay, there are two problems with it, because the compatibility exists. The issue is that right now, if you're buying an ARM-powered Windows device, you're using almost certainly a Qualcomm chip, right? Now again, just like how the M1 chip is a extension of the mobile-focused, iPhone chips. A Qualcomm chip such as the SQ1 or the SQ2 is very much an extension of the mobile stuff. In fact, the first sort of Snapdragon processors that you had inside Windows devices were just like Snapdragon 835s. Like it was like straight out of your Pixel or your Nexus or whatever, dropped into a laptop. Obviously, there's a lot of software involved, but the issue here is twofold. Now, at the moment, sitting here, 2021, Qualcomm chips are just simply still too far behind. Apple have made the strides to actually outperform the Intels and the AMDs of the world in the vast majority of these sort of like laptop-based use cases. Qualcomm are still a little bit behind, right? Not to say they won't catch up. And honestly, my bet is when we watch this video back in 2026, we'll be like, ha ha ha, remember when they were behind? Because there's certainly the trajectory, they're catching up a lot faster, but they're a couple years behind, right? Which means that at the moment, these Snapdragon on ARM or on Windows sort of devices, they're just simply not as powerful, full stop, right? And then you have the compatibility layer and you have the software where, Windows is not saying, hey, guess what? Intel and AMD processors go away. Every Windows developer needs to now program for ARM because quite simply, not a lot of people are actually buying these things.
And I think that's going to be a big factor in why kind of ARM on Windows will never actually catch up to M1 Max.
Slowly.
I think here's my prediction. Over the next 5 years, Apple's going to really pull away for a time while, like you say, Qualcomm catches up, while all these other manufacturers can catch up with ARM. But for the next 5 years, there's going to be a big gap.
Yeah.
But I don't think that gap is ever going to be, actually closed. I think it will get much closer, but because of that compatibility, controlling every aspect of the software, hardware, that's why I think that the M1 Max or whatever it is in 5 years.
M6 at that point.
Yeah, exactly. I think they're always going to have that leg up there, which is kind of been true for a long time, and now the processor is really the last piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, and it's going to be difficult on Windows because while there's certainly if you use a ARM-based Windows device right now, it is fine, right? Like the actual Windows part, they've had that up and running for years. The problem is while the performance isn't quite there for an optimized app, that's fine. But when you're running in that compatibility layer, so essentially something that hasn't actually been updated to run, it goes from being a little slower to a lot slower than something like an Intel or an AMD device, and certainly way slower than an M1 Mac.
The one we were trying was Adobe, which Photoshop just doesn't work on.
And they've promised
Windows
updates for years. Yeah. But the problem is, I've never seen any of these numbers. I'm completely taking a guess here. But if I were to take an educated guess, they don't sell a lot of these ARM Windows devices, which is not to say that they're bad devices. They still have a lot of those same improvements like better battery life, LTE support. There's a lot of good stuff in these.
Well,
but
where they sell them is the business sector.
Yes, they do.
And the need versus want scenario for the business sector is so much different than you look at every time we talk about a Windows laptop, a Windows Surface, whatever. So many people no GPU, deal breaker.
Yep.
No this, deal breaker. All of those things are not deal breakers in the business sector. I personally think that Microsoft might actually just get out of the consumer side of, I think that Surface would be specifically for education or business, where having the best GPU is not really a thing. Well, that's another thing.
That's the thing though, right? That really leaves one segment of the market, which is the gaming desktop side of things, right? This is the thing that I think will take the longest to transition. I think in 2026, we're still doing gaming PC builds with Intel and AMD processors.
Yeah.
I think by that point, like I was saying earlier, there's such a long sort of tail where sort of a company comes up and goes down slowly. There's not these huge spikes, right? Right now, AMD is absolutely ascendant, right? They're doing very well. They're continuously sort of chipping away into Intel's lead. And I think for the next 5 years, that's going to continue, right? Intel still have more systems out there. You have to consider desktops aren't updated every year or whatever, right? There's a lot of systems that are running 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old processors. I think 5 years from now, Intel and AMD will largely be at parity, right? I do think that AMD are ahead right now, but Intel are going to catch up, right? Intel are too big, they're too powerful not to be behind for that long.
Intel was riding their coattails for a long time, which I think is exactly what AMD is going to start doing, and it shifts.
Yeah.
Now, I do think there's going to be a secret dark horse.
Ooh, go ahead, hit me.
what happens in 5 years when NVIDIA releases their now that they own ARM.
Well, no, they actually don't.
No,
they are purchasing ARM. A lot of people don't want them to do that, but they are trying to purchase.
Yeah. if that purchase goes through, now NVIDIA owns the architecture, right?
That would be correct.
I want to use the right term.
It's an architecture. Yes.
So now they own that. They can start making their own chips. The NVIDIA G whatever.
Yeah.
Which, guess what, works better with their NVIDIA graphics cards because the two are made for each other. The same way that the M1 Mac works better on that system.
Yeah.
So now we start seeing desktop NVIDIA chips that give that much better gaming performance. I think that's something we'll start to see.
The software side will come. I do think that ARM on Windows will just get better, right? I mean, it slowly gets better. It's getting very, very slowly better, but it will get better, right? But if you look at the desktop gaming side of things, I think that's a totally plausible thing. I think 5 years is probably a somewhat optimistic side of that, just because these chips, I mean, it's easy to forget. It takes years and years and years and years to develop a chip. And on top of that, it takes a long time for the market to move. Right. And plus, I think NVIDIA may get antitrusted out of this idea if they start doing this and then people start complaining, because it gets a little bit of a gray area there. But regardless, I think if you're looking at 2026, my prediction is this. Game PCs are probably one of the last bastions of Intel and AMD dominance. I don't think ARM is going to take over there. I think on the laptop side, it will be a little bit more of a mix, but I do think stuff like, obviously, the Apple stuff will be really far ahead. And by then, you will see, stuff like Qualcomm, stuff like NVIDIA, I guess, if they jump into it. Other ARM devices actually doing well on the laptop side. And then on the server side, I see it's going to be largely ARM-based through Microsoft chips and Qualcomm chips and Amazon chips and whoever wants to make one. I think it's gonna be a really exciting time. But let us know in the comments below, what do you think 2026 is gonna look like in the computing side? Are we all gonna throw our computers in the garbage and be using our Galaxy Fold 7s? Let us know. Make sure to ring-a-ling that ding-a-ling bell. And until next time, we're gonna go be obsolete.
Are you implying that DeX is gonna replace all our computers?